We are inside a cockpit and it's a flight simulator, and we are trying to understand with a pilot who has more than 2 decades of flying experience, trying to understand what may have happened inside the flight that crashed yesterday, the Air India flight, and also what are the pre-flight checks, what are the situation inside a cockpit in such contingencies. Sir, we are right now preparing to fly. Could you just take us through that? What could be the pre-flight checks that a pilot ensures before taking off in such a flight?
See, it's a very wide checks that we do. We do it. We check each and everything in the cockpit as well as we do the external checks as well. And until unless we are not sure and we are not satisfied, we don't, accept the flight, because we have to accept the flight from the engineer that everything is fine in the cockpit. So we do all the checks. Each and every switch we check it like it's at the right position and it is working.
Right. So, sir, in yesterday's condition, the pilot and the ATC, the last moment communication that they had, the pilot had communicated the ATC before saying Mayday. They had said that no thrust. If you could just take us through that, what would it mean? And meanwhile, if we could just, you can show us how the plane takeoffs, because the yesterday incident took place while taking off.
Right.
How common is such an incident while taking off? First tell us that, and then you can tell us why did he say no thrust and what does that mean?
It is absolutely uncommon that, during a takeoff, because you are applying very high thrust on the engines, so the possibility of failure of the engines are higher. And we do get trained in the simulators by the trainers for the various scenarios in which, at a high thrust settings, you have a malfunctions in which you need to perform some actions. You're right, and so this is very uncommon scenario which we saw yesterday.
And am I right when I say that no thrust would mean that there was no power in the engines?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. No thrust, and I believe they could not specify because they were at such a critical height. They're supposed to lift this gear as soon as they find that there is a positive rate of climb come in the altitude. So they're supposed to put the gear up, but they didn't do that. So I'm sure they must have realized it at the time of liftoff from the ground only that there is a problem in the engine.
Correct. Because it was only 32 seconds into the flight that the Mayday message had been
correct. Yes,
to
that's
ATC.
true. That's true.
Also, sir, if such a situation arises, what options do a pilot have in the cockpit? If there's no thrust, is there an option, or is that the last thing that can be reported to ATC?
So if there is no thrust, they do their memory actions from memory, or there is a checklist which comes electronically on the display which they're supposed to follow. So they do that. And no, but if the failure on the both engine at such a low altitude, there is very less possibilities they have to perform any. In fact, Sully, he was also having a height and options available from his level of, the altitude he was flying at.
So you have experience flying Boeing previously also, and for many years. This is the first crash that Dreamliner is associated with since its introduction in 2011.
Right.
How safe are these planes, and how, because they are saying this is a very rare incident that's taken place. What is your opinion on that?
Most of my life I've flown Boeings only, 737. So I believe that aircraft is very safe, and I have spent almost all my life on that aircraft, and I'm very loving with that. In fact, I've flown Airbus as well. But recently, as we have seen, because it is a manufacturer things also, that the quality has been really dropped below the standards. So that could also be one of the reasons we can see.
Sir,
otherwise it is very safe.
Previously you talked about power outage, because there was no engine in the power, which no thrust would mean actually.
Right.
What could be the possible reasons? One reason experts have been talking since yesterday is bird hit, but there were no fumes or blasts that we saw. When a bird usually hits the engine, there would be fumes from the engine. We did not see that. Secondly, there is power outage which is being talked about, because power outage would take both engines down. According to you, what could have been the possibility that this incident took place soon after, just minutes after, in fact seconds after takeoff?
With the engine that we see, so bird strike could be one of the reasons. The second could be the engine could have failed, fuel problem, or maybe the engine must have stalled or due to some turbulence in the engine. But maybe the bird has strike, but it has not such a big bird, but must have disturbed the airflow going into the engine, and engine must have stalled. There could be many reasons, but we can't say anything until we get the facts out of them, DFDR and the CVR things. Yes.
How much time does it take, sir, from retrieval of the black box and the call recordings and the data that is transmitted from the cockpit to the ATC?
Because it was on the land only, so I'm sure that again they must have found out. But as of now, we don't have any idea. But I'm sure they know the location and the which part of the aircraft it is fitted. So it's easy to.
So my last question, when the aircraft hit the ground, it went up into fumes, like it blew up. It is because it had tons of fuel and had just taken off for London, so it would have tons of fuel.
Absolutely.
Fuel is usually stored in wings of the plane.
Correct.
So when it hit the ground, it makes that impact, it exploded. That is why there has been no survivors on that plane except one. In such cases, when the pilot knows that because since yesterday the experts have been giving example of the Hudson crash, which there was a river, so it did not blow up the aircraft. So in such scenarios, what precautions can pilots take when they know that there is no way out?
Precaution, because they were not having a height.
Exactly.
Right. So when they were not having a height, and there is a subtle effect also. Even the Sully in the also they said when they were blaming the pilot only, therefore all the reasons of that Hudson River accident. So there was a subtle effect on the pilots. And when you don't have any thrust, and when you're seeing that right now, if we see outside also in the night especially, I have no choice at this altitude if anything happens. So having a problem at 600 feet just after the takeoff, when you don't have a thrust on both engines, the choices are very less. And maybe even if they try, there could be major problems and they could have gone and hit somewhere else. So decision time was very less.
Right. So this was an expert in flying with over more than 25 years of experience telling us what could have happened yesterday. As preliminary reports will be out soon, but the AIB report, the final report, will certainly take more time.